the NomadMania travel community what sustainable travel means to them.
Sustainable travel, to me, is traveling with a consideration and respect for the environment, for nature, for wildlife, and for local cultures, and leaving every place we visit in as good a condition or even better than we find them, so that our children and their children will be able to enjoy them too.
For me, sustainability means mostly preserving local cultures and also lessening the impact of travel so that also future generations can continue enjoying traveling around the world.
So for me, sustainable travel is about understanding the state of the world at the moment and understanding our duty as travelers to act responsibly towards it in order to preserve what we love about traveling for future generations.
For me, it's about making conscious choices on how I'm going to go about my travels in such a way that I minimize the adverse effects to the environment and maximize the positive impacts to the communities that I visit.
Take it slow, stay long enough for more than snapshots of grammable places and nice food. Some people would love to travel but can't. If you've been blessed with the time and resources to travel, don't waste it cloud chasing. Only really visited a new place if you've learned something new while you're there. A deeper understanding of a culture, history, or local politics should always be part of why you travel.
Think global, act local. I'm trying to support as much as I can the local communities by staying in local guest houses whenever I travel.
For me, travel sustainable means reducing the impact on local communities, immersing in the cultures, trying not to influence them.
There are many ways to travel sustainably, and one of them is to go and stay locally. For example, now I'm spending this weekend just outside of my city in western Ukraine in a pretty nice rural village.
What is sustainable travel for me? It's travel places like that, small towns, eating in local restaurants with a good local food, drinking local craft beer, and support small local business. I wish all of you very good, happy, sustainable travels.
Welcome everybody to our Sustainable Travel webinar. My name is Dondon Bales. I'm a member of the Executive Committee of NomadMania, and I'm also the head of the Sustainable Travel Advocacy Committee. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our second webinar series and our first featuring a sustainable travel as a theme. And this is in celebration of this month's sustainable travel theme for July. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the other members of our panel for today. Joining me is the chair of the Travel Care Code Initiative, Dr. Jonathon Day. Another member of our panel who will be joining us is the Interim Executive Director of the Center for Responsible Travel, Wesley Espinosa. And also joining us in the panel is the youngest NomadMania verified UN Master and a World Conservation Journey Traveler, Billy Offland. And our final panelist would be a UN Master, travel book author, and a member of the NomadMania Sustainable Advocacy Travel Committee, Boris Kester. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us as part of the panel for our Sustainable Travel webinar. All right, so the way that our webinar will go on today, so we'll spend the first 15 minutes going through some introductions with our partner organizations, which I'm glad to partner, that NomadMania is glad to partner with, which is the Travel Care Code Initiative, as well as the Center for Responsible Travel, CREST, and also get to know members of our NomadMania Travel Sustainable Committee, Boris and Billy. And so I'll start the question rolling with Boris actually, on why sustainable travel should matter to us in NomadMania. I guess given that you've traveled, you're one of the most traveled people. And yeah, why should it matter to us?
Yes, thank you, Dondon, for organizing this. And let's not forget there's more members on our committee, which are not online right now. So for me, I've been traveling since ever in my memory, and I'm really happy to see the huge advantages that travel brings, both to me and to local communities. But lately, like in the last years, I've been coming to realize more and more that that there's also a negative impact of travel. Travel is one of the biggest industries in the world, and it's increasing rapidly. And I'm seeing increasingly also the impact that it can have on local communities, on the environment, and on several other aspects. So for me, I've come to the conclusion that this is something that we need to consider and to think about. So I'm really happy that NomadMania took a step to take responsibility and to raise awareness about. We all want to continue traveling, and we all want to for future generations to enjoy travel because it brings so much. But I think it's time that we also need to see that we need to do this in a more conscious way, and to preserve what makes travel so fantastic.
Thank you for that insight, Boris. And I think, yeah, it's a very important topic. And I'm really glad that this July we took the time here at NomadMania to observe the Travel Sustainable Month. And over the course of this month, we've been featuring in our blog, in our NomadMania blog, our partners, such as the Travel Care Code initiative. We've introduced the Travel Care Code. And who better to best explain to us what the Travel Care Code is, other than the chair of the initiative, Dr. Jonathon Day. Welcome to our panel.
Thank you so much for having me. It is really exciting to be here and to be with people who are so passionate about travel. We introduced the Travel Care Code a couple of years ago. It was a combination of people who were engaged in marketing and academia who wanted to help people just answer the question, how do I travel more responsibly? So if we could just put those slides up that we were looking at before, I'll just sort of run quickly through what we're all about. Travel Care Code is an initiative that we have part of my Sustainable Tourism Lab, and our vision is to create a world where every traveler is a force for good. We all love to travel. There are billions of people taking trips every year, and the impact of those trips makes a difference. And so our mission is to encourage people to travel responsibly. And I love the videos that we started off the session with, because, best practices in sustainability that enrich travelers. And I heard that coming through in those videos, but also enriching host communities and the impact that we're having as travelers on those communities. So we work with the travel industry, and we also work on supporting individuals who are traveling. And I'm just quickly going to whip through the 10 things that we have in our Travel Care Code, the 10 suggestions that we have. They're all overlapping and interrelated. They're all pretty basic, really, when you come to it, but they're designed to just remind people as they travel. And so the first one is learn about the destination. The second one, and yeah, perfect. Don't leave your good habits at home. Many of us are really concerned about sustainability in our home. We recycle, we turn off the lights. Take this with you when you travel. 3 is be a fuel efficient traveler, to the best of your ability. And this is going to be something I'm sure we're going to talk about later in the question and answer. 4, make informed decisions. So learn a little bit about destination when you go to it. 5, be a good guest, right? We are all so privileged to be able to visit other people's homes, other people's communities. Quite often, travelers don't think about it that way, and so take a moment. What does it mean to be a good guest? Support the locals, and I heard that coming through in the videos that introduce the things. Spend money in the local economy as much as you can. 7 is dispose of your waste properly. Be mindful this is one of the important things, if we're mindful as we're doing it. And that doesn't mean you can't have a good time when you're on vacation or in your travels, but you can stop and think about what you're doing. Number 8 is protect the natural surroundings. We're all concerned about the environment. Really worthwhile thinking for a moment. So many of us are adventurous and we want to go off the trails, and yet protecting our national parks and special places is one of the things we need to be thoughtful for. Number 9 is make your travel zero's emission as much as you can. Again, like I said, I think we're going to circle back to this one later. And number 10 is bring your good habits home. What we find is that people see stuff when they're traveling that they can bring home and be more sustainable when they do it. So those are the 10 things that we advocate and recommend when you're traveling responsibly, and that's what the Travel Care Code is all about. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to be into this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for sharing those 10 important Travel Care Code guidelines that we will talk about much later on as well. So at this stage, I'd like to ask a question to Billy. As our youngest UN master is verified on record. As world travelers, how can we best approach the topic of sustainable travel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be quite a daunting thing for a lot of people. And one thing that I'm really concerned about or like to push is I don't really like these sort of generalized prescriptions of what it means to be a sustainable traveler. You've got to fulfill your quota of, if you don't do that, you're not a sustainable traveler. If you don't do this, you're not a sustainable traveler. And Boris sort of hinted at it earlier. It's like we need to be limiting our negative impacts of travel. Like we know the negative impacts that travel can have, but travel, and I think as Jonathon said, travel can be a massive, massive force for good. And as much as we need to minimize our negative impacts of travel, we should definitely be looking at how can we maximize our positive impacts as well. And I think looking at it in terms of sustainability is a spectrum. And I think that it can be very much, I think it should be a personal thing. Being a sustainable traveler, I don't even think you should be describing yourself as a sustainable traveler. Sustainable travel is just something that everyone is in a different steps in their sort of journey. And all we kind of have to care about, not taking these generalized prescriptions, but just doing better than last time. Every trip is different. Every circumstance that someone else is in is different. So the way that you're going to approach sustainability in your own mind is going to be different to potentially everyone else around you. And I think using the resources that Jonathon will share, that Wesley will share, and these organizations are great for you to be able to, I guess, map what you can and can't do, or sort of get it into your own head and go, well, these are the options that I have in front of me. This one won't work for me here. This one won't work for me here. But it's just sort of giving yourself the greatest level of awareness as possible, which I hope we at NomadMania will start to do through our resources. And then just go on your journey and don't feel bad about starting somewhere, or don't feel bad about not doing it all. It's doing better than last time.
That's really great, Billy, and thanks for shedding some light on how we would approach sustainable travel as travelers. And also, we're so excited to also partner with another organization that's really passionate about sustainable and responsible travel, which is the Center for Responsible Travel. So I'd like to call on to Wesley to give us a view of what does the Center for Responsible Travel do, and how can it help NomadMania, achieve our goals to travel sustainably.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dondon, and thank you all for the invitation. Really excited to speak with all of the folks here, and hope this is a conversation and dialogue that continues to progress and grow as time moves on. So yeah, I would love to share a little bit more about the Center for Responsible Travel, though we just go by CREST. So I know Center for Responsible Travel is a mouthful, just say CREST. You can go to the next slide, please. So just quickly, I just kind of wanted to share, we're a nonprofit organization with headquarters in Washington, D.C. We have a global team and have been around for 20 years implementing projects, programs, and building tourism knowledge and research around the world. Our mission as an organization is quite simply to be a center of tourism knowledge, empowerment, and action for destination communities. And that is our mission that we hope will work its way towards a vision of a world where travel benefits communities and the environment. So the work that we do is focused on destination communities, right? And so some of the stuff today that I'll talk about, I will say will fall sort of on the onus of destinations. But in addition, it's a whole symbiotic relationship, right? Travelers also have to play their part in improving their practices. So the way that we look at this is that there are 4 key threats. 3 of these 4 threats exist with or without tourism, but irresponsible tourism can exacerbate these threats, right? However, positive tourism practices, whether they be by practitioners, as in DMOs or destination management organizations, or by tourism businesses, positive practices can actually counteract these 4 threats and create a paradigm shift in travel and tourism. So all of the work that we do ties into addressing these 4 threats, though we try to take a focus at the community level that we know will build long-term to addressing these 4 threats. You can go to the next slide, please. And the way that we do that is through a 4-pillar approach. So think of these 4 pillars to address the 4 threats as sort of thematic areas, right? So a project that we implement may consist of more than one of these, only one of these, but they are the following. Number 1, applied research. In travel and tourism, there's so much incredible work being done out there, sort of in 2 main spheres, one in academia, but unfortunately it's really challenging, especially for travelers and some practitioners, especially those who are short on resources, to be able to access that research and make it applicable to what they're doing and take that research and turn them into practices. And then on the private side, it's unfortunate, but they're often inaccessible. Research sits behind paywalls, etc. So our idea as an organization is to take all of that incredible work that's out there, bring it together into one center, and ensure that organizations, businesses, and individuals can improve their practices through research that's being carried out by experts in the field. Number 2 is destination stewardship. And I'm not going to dive too much into this, but we have several projects that we've implemented and are actively implementing related to destination stewardship planning and implementation. And this idea is that tourism can no longer just be marketed. This volume-based approach to tourism, where destinations say more travelers, more travelers, more travelers, isn't taking a necessarily holistic approach that brings all representatives in a community to the same table to collectively manage and balance tourism. Number 3, advocacy and systems change. Ultimately, we're talking about big issues here as it relates to climate change, as it relates to biodiversity loss. It's really, really important that we advocate for major systemic change, because otherwise that work that we do at the community level isn't building off one another and isn't creating the macro scale change that we'd like to see. And ultimately, a big part of this is collaborative action and collaborative impact. And so we really believe in collaboration over competition, right? And then finally is education. This bleeds into everything we do. It's this conversation that we're having right now. Sometimes we see Crest as the educators. We partner with educators. We have a whole academic affiliates program that's incredible with institutions from around the world. But sometimes we're also those being educated. And I want to give a shout out to Jonathon, who's actually a part of our academic affiliates program. And yeah, these are sort of our four pillars and how we look at those threats. Next slide, please. Can we go to the next? Yeah, perfect. And so just wanted to give you an idea of, actively, we've been around for 20 years, but at this point in time, these are the projects that we're implementing. You can see that they're primarily in the Americas right now, though we have worked around the world. We have a destination stewardship planning project that we're planning in conjunction with George Washington University in the town of Taos, New Mexico. We have some destination stewardship management, capacity building, wayfinding, placemaking work that we're doing on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan called. It looks like it cut out for a second. Can you all hear me? We have an impact tourism program in the Magallanes region of Chile. And then, yeah, we're good. And then we also have a destination stewardship planning project we just finished in the Lake Tahoe region, and we would love to invite you all to our World Tourism Day Forum, which will be held virtually in September. So just wanted to give you an idea of some of the projects and programs we're working on now. And again, really excited to have this conversation, answer some questions, and hear from you all and this community of travelers. And on that note, I think there's one more slide. Yeah, on that note, feel free to reach out to me, check out our website. But I kind of want to close this off and transition into our next segment by showing a video that was made by our Crest team a couple years back that hopefully speaks to what we're talking about and sustainable travel and practices that you can.
At the Center for Responsible Travel, we believe travel done well can promote a healthy environment while helping communities thrive.
Tourism is the world's largest service industry. In fact, it provides 1 in 10 jobs globally.
But tourism, more than any other industry, relies on a healthy environment and vibrant local cultures.
Unfortunately, the way many of us travel can, at times, do a great deal of damage.
The growing threats of climate change and over-tourism make Crest's work to promote responsible travel more important than ever.
We must transform the tourism industry in order for tourism itself to survive.
What we believe is that we need to really look at tourism with the same kind of rigor that we've looked at the oil industry, we've looked at mass agriculture and so on, to help people understand the impact of tourism.
Crest is unique, providing interdisciplinary analysis and innovative solutions to support responsible tourism.
Crest projects have ranged from a study of the economic value of bear hunting versus bear viewing in the Great Bear Rainforest in British Columbia, to strengthening small-scale and household-based tourism in Cuba.
At Crest, we believe the answer is not to stay home. Rather, it is to travel in ways that are smarter.
Responsible travel provides a wonderful vacation that protects the environment, provides benefits to local communities, and honors indigenous cultures.
My name is Martha Honey.
My name is Samantha Bray.
My name is Gregory Miller.
And I believe
we can transform the way the world travels.
Thank you for that video, and thank you for sharing, Wesley, on what Crest does. And over this last few weeks, we've actually posted in our NomadMania blog some really useful resources that Crest has put together for us. And these are really practical, actionable resources that are really helpful for world travelers to use. So thank you for sharing that with our community. All right, so at this point of the program, as promised, we will reveal the results of the travel survey that we've done this past month. And so I'm going to show you the next couple of slides in terms of what the survey is telling us. We've got 289 respondents, so thank you to those who took time to answer the survey. We had 12 questions. And based on the survey responses, we've categorized this presentation based on what we considered as our key strengths in terms of where we got responses that lean towards our travel community, leaning towards sustainable travel practices. So let's have a look on the questions and the responses. So this question was around the scenario: you are snorkeling in the Barrier Reef in Cape Colker, Belize, and you're most excited about. And interestingly, 84.1% of our community answered that you'll go snorkeling to see the sharks and the stingrays and maybe take photos, but you will not touch them, even though your guide says it's okay to do so. So that's a really good indication, of our our community's, I guess, respect for wildlife. That's the focus area here. And as you can see at the bottom, we've tried to map it around the travel care code guideline, which is to protect your natural surroundings, which Jonathan shared earlier. So this is really good. I think this is a good strength for our community that we do this. So let's look at our next one. You would like to join a trip to the edge of the world from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. How will you normally go about arranging for this? And again, 71.6% majority said you will search a local fixer or tour provider through Googling or asking around our travel network and will contact them directly. It's very representative of our community of independent travelers. And again, why is this important? Because this indicates local support and it aligns to the travel care code around supporting locals. When we do this, we make sure we help that local economy. So really good results from responses. The third one is the scenario. You visited Ayers Rock, Uluru in Australia a month before the October 2019, knowing that the government was going to make it illegal to climb up after that date. And 65% of us responded that you would not have climbed to the top, even though it was not yet illegal to do so, mainly in response to the Aboriginal owner's request not to climb it because it is a sacred path of spiritual significance for them. And again, the focus area here is around respect for culture, and where it aligns to the travel care code is essentially to be a good guest. And really, again, good strength for our community. So let's look at the next one. You want to go backpacking across Central Europe and you're still deciding whether to take trains or the short domestic budget flights instead, which sometimes come out as cheaper, especially with a carry-on. What would you likely to choose to do? And 51% of us prefer to take the train since using more fuel efficient transportation is one of your major considerations together with price and speed. There is 29% who are flexible with A or B. When we looked at the explanations or the commentaries of those who are flexible, it was still leaning towards using trains, which is great. Some of them even said they want the trains because of the views of the scenery when you travel by train. So again, this aligns to the travel care code of be a fuel efficient traveler. So it's really good that this is another strength for our community. Okay, and the other strength we have, so this scenario, you are packing your bag to visit Dhaka, Bangladesh and decide whether it's worth bringing a water bottle, which would add weight to your carry-on luggage. 50.5% of us always bring a water bottle in your bag when you travel. That's really good. Majority, I guess, brings a water bottle. Now, the 9.7% are flexible with A or B. When we looked at, some of the commentaries there, we found out that some of the considerations of bringing a bottle is essentially whether the area that we're visiting has the ability to provide, clean water, essentially. So so this is a focus area on plastic waste reduction, and it aligns to the travel care code. Don't leave your good habits at home, and dispose of waste properly. So those are kind of the key strengths. Again, this is a key strength for our community. And before I move on to the areas of opportunities, I'm going to pause first here and ask our panelists around their thoughts and observations with so far what we've seen in these findings on key strengths. So who would like to start?
I'll start. First of all, I love that so much of the community is so concerned about these individual, each of these issues. It's terrific that we as travelers, particularly those of us who are travelers that do a lot of traveling, are really sort of conscious of these things and the slow travel movement and taking some time to look around things. That's such a positive thing. I think in these answers, there are nuances as well. I was struck as I was looking at that one about getting a local tour guide. Quite often we look for a local tour guide, and I know in some parts of the world, and I do some work in Nepal, you're looking for somebody who's really cost efficient, the cheapest one that you can possibly get. I think it's really good to be aware of local issues, and understand and look for ethical tour suppliers as you're doing that, so that the people that you're working with are getting a fair wage and getting support as you're traveling. Sometimes getting a local tour guide at the cheapest rate is not the best, and I know that's easy for me to say, but knowing some of the issues in our supply chain of tourism, the people who are at the lowest level of tourism often lose out a lot. I think we as travelers can be educated on some of these things, and particularly with things like porters and so forth, be prepared to pay a fair wage, fair trade, for some of the things that we're doing. Just wanted to throw it out there as a thought for the community.
Thank you for that. There is a question in from the audience. I just wanted to related to the survey responses. So the question from PF, traveling by overland buses instead of the train, I heard is much more sustainable than taking a train. What do you think? Any thoughts from our panel?
I think that's a big assumption, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that traveling, and it's very region dependent as well. There's a lot of, what type of buses are they? What type of trains are they? What are they powered by? There's just a lot of questions there, right? I think the biggest thing, right, is like ultimately to travel, we have to take all of these different forms of transportation, right? Like at some point, we will likely fly. And, I always tell people we're the Center for Responsible Travel, not the Center for Responsible Not Travel. However, I think it's important that wherever you go and however you are traveling, it's really important that you weigh out the pros and cons of each, right? When you can practice slow travel, practice slow travel. If you're trying to choose between a train and a bus, you've already made the right step of choosing between a train and a bus, right? And so you can do additional research, but I think it's great that more folks are especially in this community are interested in traveling by train and bus. So I would say that that's kind of a loaded question, and I don't think I can directly answer that without having more context about the specific location.
And I'm just going to jump in there as well, because I think, as Wesley said, you've already made the right decision by having to choose between a train and a bus rather than take a plane or whatever. It's like the difference isn't significant, and don't be beating yourself up about not making the right decision there. They are both a pretty good decision. At home, I wouldn't go, oh, I need to get into the center of Manchester. Is it more sustainable to take a train or a bus? It's like, I'm just going to do it. But it's like, so don't beat yourself up about making those decisions when you've kind of already consciously got there.
Great. There is a comment in the chat as well. This is around the water bottle topic. So from Luis Morgan. So I always travel with my own water bottle, but it's not always easy to find safe places to fill it in countries where you cannot drink water from a tap. So I guess when we advocate for people bringing their water bottles, how do we fill in this gap where the destination themselves is not able to kind of help us become more sustainable? And I guess one of the suggestions I actually saw in the commentary in the survey was in some of these places you can buy like big volume of water that you can stock up in where you're staying, so that you can, using your bottled water, you can refill using this big jar, so that you don't end up buying individual bottled waters. So in that way, it's practical to still bring your own bottled water. So that was one of the suggestions I saw in the commentary there. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, the other option would be like I traveled in Pakistan, and which is not really known for safe water supply, and we used filters. So they take like half a minute. You have to pass the water through the filter, and then you can just fill up your water bottle. So so this would be another way to tackle this problem. And as you said, the other thing I wanted to say, you already said it. It's just buy, which I also do in some countries. You buy, I don't know, a 5 liter or like a big bottle of water, and you keep it as a supply, and you just refill your smaller bottle from there.
Yep. There was a commentary here as well in the chat. I bring a water from Eat, Walk, Learn. I bring a water bottle and a water filtering straw, together with boiling water in my Airbnb, hotel, etc. And using the straw, I refill in my water bottle. So that's also a really good practical suggestion.
These are all great ideas. These are all great ideas. I just want to add that if you do, because sometimes it happens and you do have to purchase a plastic water bottle, try and avoid it, obviously. But at the end of the day, the idea is, take a bigger picture view, right? It doesn't stop with the purchase of that water bottle. How are you disposing of it? What type of, what is your waste? What are your waste practices like when you get to that destination? Are you finding ways to not create more waste in other ways, right? So just always, don't shame yourself for having to purchase something, and try and think of how you can take a more holistic approach in other ways.
And I also find that it's not all sort of on you as well. And if you have the knowledge and you're sort of conscious of your impact, and you get to a hotel and it's like, oh, I've got to buy a plastic water bottle to be able to drink, then it's kind of, you can go to the hotel and go, it'd be great if you had a sort of water filtration system, or you had a big water butt so I could fill from my water bottle. So it's as much about us, if we have the knowledge, trying to help educate other people, try and bring everyone else up alongside us, whether that's fellow travelers or even sort of hotels or other tourism providers.
Yeah, there was an interesting comment from Rabia Jafar that there are also travel straws on the market now that filter water as you drink it through the straw. I didn't know that. That's really good to find where I can find some of these travel straws. So that's good. Thank you for that suggestion and posting it here. Go ahead.
Well, so I think what is good here in a broader picture is that I think what we really good is to share all these suggestions. Like we all have hopefully we'll all have our ways to deal with plastic and with waste, and then now you hear something I never heard about, a travel straw that filters water. So that's fantastic. I will look into it, and I'm sure there's other people who have other tips and advices that I might not know about, or maybe I do. I know things that others don't know about. So I think there's a lot to gain in just sharing this kind of practical tips.
And that is the strength of this community, that you can share this and be able to you're all traveling so much. You're all seeing those great ideas. That's what we mean by bring those good ideas home. Share them so that we can all benefit from them as we go.
That's great. Any other comments on the strengths based on the survey responses earlier before I move on to the areas of opportunities?
Well, I think it shows that, or it makes people probably more aware that sustainable travel is more than flying less or not flying. It's way broader than that, and the survey shows it by all the diverse questions that you put into it. And I think already that is a major gain. So yeah, that's just a general remark. So I'm curious about the next section. the opportunities.
All right. All right. Well, so we'll get back to the slide. So at this point, we're going to look at the next slide, which is the area of opportunity. So in this next slide, actually, this is still a strength, actually. So this is around you are looking to make a positive difference in the world while traveling in Siam Reap, Cambodia, through word of mouth from fellow travelers. You learn there is this opportunity to help with an orphanage through a small donation and interacting with lonely kids to make them happy. 50% of our community said that they will be a bit skeptical and will decline the opportunity to volunteer and to donate to the orphanage. When I looked at the commentaries as well, for those who were flexible, the common theme there was around doing research first to make sure that they're not getting involved in a scam, and also that it's an ethical, so that when they get involved, that it will not have an adverse impact to the children, for example. So it's really around responsible volunteerism, and where it aligns to the travel care code is really making informed decisions when we get involved in this uh, this type of volunteerism. And I know Crest also has provided some guidelines in their impact giving. Maybe Wesley, can you tell us more a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So it's again, it's difficult to comment on the specific point there. I think impact giving and what I tell people as much as possible is when you go somewhere, before you get there, do your research, right? Do your research on the issues that are most pressing to that community. Do your research to understand what nonprofits, what organizations are working at the forefront of those issues, whether they be related to human development, culture, biodiversity, the environment, whatever they may be, and definitely don't make split decisions on supporting something, right? I think I'm oftentimes wary of opportunities that aren't provided to locals first. I think we need to be careful about volunteering in places where we're taking education opportunities away from locals. We're taking the opportunity for local experts to be able to support whatever that cause may be. And so, doing your research is so critical to this, right? And other ways that, we really suggest doing this while you travel is, by sort of going back to one of the earlier points, when you hire a local guide, you have the opportunity to interface with somebody that knows those issues intimately, right, and can point you in the right direction, right? So, so that's kind of how we look at impact tourism and giving when you travel. It's really an important part of the puzzle, but you have to do your research and you have to be really careful. And I think oftentimes, if you do your research and you figure out where your dollar can go furthest, that will have a much more significant impact than volunteering in a lot of cases. Not all cases, but in most cases.
Thanks, Wesley, for sharing that. All right, we'll move on to the next question. So I guess now, yeah, these are the areas for opportunities. So this one, based on the responses, we've classified them as opportunities. So the first one was around being a solo traveler visiting Baku, Azerbaijan, which you've heard has a low English proficiency index. Who would you likely hang out with more while there? So 35% of our community will tend to hang out more with the locals, even though it might be challenging to communicate. However, 40% are flexible, whether they'll hang out with fellow travelers or with locals. The key consideration really around that flexibility was, it really depends who they chance upon while they're there. I didn't see any kind of deliberate intent to really, to hang out more with the locals. So whoever comes, then they'll hang out with them. So I guess the reason why this is an area of opportunity, because if we look at it from a focus area of having local interaction, I think there is an opportunity there to be more deliberate and intentional when we visit a place, to really have that authentic immersive experience with the locals. And I guess Boris and Billy, having traveled all countries in the world, what has been your experience? Like, what is it like, you know, going to a place, being with the locals? Like, what are the challenges around having these local interactions? Or
Me.
or maybe what are some tips that people can have, make it easy for people to interact with locals more?
I think it starts pretty easily by trying to just even learn a few words in a local language, which could be a good opener. Have a language guide of some kind. And nowadays we have translator apps on our phones. So and actually many locals have that, and they in my experience they're often more than happy to try and communicate through those apps, even though you don't speak any common language between the two of you. In this question, I clearly prefer to hang out with locals. Of course, I might meet travelers on the way, and I'm not saying I would ignore them, but when I travel, I'm mostly interested in connecting with people in the country I'm traveling in. So it's good to see that also in the survey, apparently most fellow travelers have a similar approach.
Thanks, Boris. All right, let's look at the next question. This one is interesting. So your annual leave from work is approaching and you will get 14 days off. You plan to visit the Balkans, which is a great opportunity to increase the number of countries you visit. And so 45% of our community prefer depth over breadth, which means they'll plan to visit only 1 to 2 countries, spending approximately a week each to give more time to explore the various regions. But why this is an area of opportunity is, if you look closely, the people who prefer breadth over depth is a close 40%. So there's not a big gap around people who travel slowly than people who travel. The other option was to travel in as much countries as they could in a short span of time. And we were looking at this at the context of slow travel. And I know this month we've launched the slow series in NomadMania that helps to track, because we really want to encourage people to immerse themselves and stay longer in the places that they visit. But I'm curious to hear from the panel their thoughts around slow travel and what is the response to this question. What do you think of this response, and what the opportunities are? Who wants to share?
I'll share, but I'd also like to hear from Jonathon too, on this one. I think, on the traveler side of things, slow travel is certainly one of the most effective ways to get to know a community, to understand a community, and to have a positive impact on a community. This idea of breadth, I understand it. And I understand that it's a big part of your community, but I think even if it takes more time, the idea that you can travel slowly, get to know a place, understand that place intimately, get to know its challenges, support the community in certain ways, spread your dollars further within that community, that's much more impactful, and I think also enriching for both sides, and a better exchange of information, ideas, and opportunities than traveling for breadth. So, I mean, that's just my initial reaction to that. And I think it's, slow travel is something that once you embrace it, it's amazing. It makes a little weekend trip from, 15 minutes from your home more enjoyable, and you get to know a community 15 minutes away from you that you didn't previously know. So yeah, certainly slow travel is something that should be taken into consideration, something easy to practice and something fun if you're just trying to figure out ways that you can have a more positive impact.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a slightly different point of view. Not that I disagree with anything that Wesley's saying, but I'm really not a fan of telling people. And this is sort of funny because I've got this 10 things that you can do, but I'm not a great fan of shoulds. We should do this or we should do that. I understand why you might, so long as you're traveling responsibly, if you're going to all 6 countries and you're taking the train or, conscious of your travel and conscious of the fact that you're, spending money with local folks and everything. I'm not going to judge you on whether, you should stay slow or stay fast. I personally think it's better to stay slow and get to know individual places, but I've certainly been on trips where I've needed to go to multiple places to get a feel for it before I dig deep. So yeah, the same is true with, the question before. And, it's wonderful that as we as individual travelers who travel a lot can go and hang out with the locals. But if you start to scale that, then we're invading the locals' private space. And so, there are arguments why, we hang with the locals where we can, but we also respect their community as well, and their right to have some space away from visitors as well. So, I just, really encourage, as we're going through the shoulds of, what we could do better in the future, let's be gracious with each other about how there are different nuances, and it's all good. So long as we're being mindful and thoughtful about the impacts that we're having and working to try and make them positive.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Jonathon.
I just want to add and say that travel shaming is a huge no-no in my book. So, and I appreciate the should comment. I think that's a really great way to look at that and avoid travel shaming. Yeah, just want to say great comments.
That's great. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question in the interest of time. So, okay, this is a scenario where we want to book a flight from the US to Kazakhstan, and essentially 44% of our community choose the greener choice, which has only 2 connection stops. But but compare that to 36% who will choose the cheapest option, even though there are 3 connection stops. But when we looked at the 20% who were flexible, most of the commentaries with the 20% was leaning towards the whatever, a decision point where the green option wasn't really a key consideration. So the key considerations were almost always price, the time, and convenience. The green option is probably an afterthought. And so I guess, is this kind of, a question, is this something that you've seen kind of commonplace at this stage? And I know there are some companies that are now advertising a greener option. What's the appetite of travelers kind of adopting and buying to the greener option? Or how do we kind of move towards that if we need to? Any thoughts?
I'll jump in because I think it was going to be my general comment for the whole of this section. Things aren't black and white, and travel is incredibly complicated. I'm doing some kind of running maths as we go along. How or what kind of average percent of people are unsure between our options A and B? And I think that's a massive thing with all of this. There are so many considerations to be made whilst traveling, and price and money and preferences of traveling. A load of people in this option said, oh, but what happens if I could take my layover for a day and see somewhere else en route and all of this? And I think, yeah, I just wanted to put my point in here that there is no one size fits all answer for each one of your trips, for everything. But I think to kind of to enjoy their trips, and not if you're moving fast and you've got 10 days worth of travel, you don't want to spend 2 days of it. It's always, if you can, you should take the more sustainable option. It's like, if you've got the money, then why not? If you don't have the money and you don't have the time, then only do what you can do. But as long as you're conscious of what you're doing, that's all anyone can ask of you.
Thanks for sharing that insight, Billy. Yes, Jonathon.
Yeah, I just want to build off what Billy's talking about, because I think this is a really important thing, and I know that we're sort of coming sort of to a conclusion here. We were talking about travel shaming, and I think you can do your head in on some of these calculations on, cost versus carbon. The elephant in the room is your flights, right? And so, be mindful about how you can deal with that. How can you deal with it in terms of carbon offsets, or, whatever it is that you're personally doing. But let's not put the burden of individual responsibility solely on the traveler. One of the things that I think you guys as a group of travelers can do is to advocate for system change. And Wesley talks about system change, right? So talk to people about how we should be investing in new aviation research that allows us to travel electric instead of using biofuels or even traditional fuels. We need to be sort of recognizing that our individual actions are important, but we also need to be, as a group of people who love travel and have a voice, working towards system change as well. And putting all of the weight of these decisions on the traveler themselves without recognizing that the system needs to change is unfair and is causing anxiety and stress for a whole generation of people that is really not part of the solution. It's part of a new set of problems that we're creating for ourselves.
Thanks for sharing that insight, Jonathon. And Boris?
Well, I think the other aspect here, which needs to be addressed, is that for some people, a $500 difference is a lot of money, and I think the issue might be: should travel be only for the happy few rich people, or should it be like a more democratic right almost to travel? So. I'm not pretending to have any answers here, but it's something that probably needs to be addressed as well. You cannot force people who've probably been saving money for maybe a year or more to make that once in a lifetime trip, and then someone is telling them, oh, but you should choose the green option because otherwise you're not a good person. Who are we to say that?
Yeah, except I would just add in there's so many things in life that we treat as rights, and always with rights there are responsibilities, and that's one of the reasons why I think this conversation is so important. Because if you take the right to travel, then, and in the past we haven't asked this of anyone, we haven't asked people to think about what their responsibility is to travel. And I just throw in there, I think that it is reasonable to say, okay, if you're going to travel, are you thinking about what the cost of your travel is? So yeah, like I said, and as Wesley said, I'm not into travel shaming, and I understand why people make some decisions that they do. I think at the same time, but we can be thinking about what our responsibilities are. And I see from the answers of the survey that your members are certainly doing that as they're working through these complicated questions.
Thank you. There is a question from the audience from Jane Liu. Do younger respondents prefer cheaper flights in the survey? We haven't dissected to that level of detail, Jane, but when we publish the results in our blog, we can share kind of the statistics and demographics on the response in the survey if it helps. And there's a question, a comment as well from Justin Kirby. So almost an hour and COVID hasn't been mentioned yet as a factor in making decisions about how we travel. Surely this is part of doing the right thing for local communities.
I can take a sort of an effort to responding to that. I think without muddying the waters with, now whether people should or shouldn't travel related to COVID, I do think there are some important things to highlight from COVID and some lessons learned that can be adapted and we should consider as travelers. I'm not going to mention any by name, but with some of the communities that we worked with, especially some smaller communities, they very much took an approach like we're going to close ourselves up, especially at the height of COVID, right? And there were nearby communities from other regions, other states, where travelers weren't as careful or taking as the same health approach as they were. And so they would go into these communities where they were very restricted, closed down, and just kind of go around willy-nilly and not really respecting what local practice is. And so I think the real point here isn't necessarily related to COVID. It's related to respecting what local practices, customs, etc. are. And if a community is trying to keep itself safe, or if a community is trying to keep itself healthy, or if they're trying to protect their sacred land, I think the utmost thing that we as travelers have the responsibility to do is respect those sacred places and the health, the long-term health and desires of that community, right? And so wherever we travel, considering what that community is going through and how to not exacerbate problems or how to not trample over their sacred land, customs, etc., it's a super important consideration. So I'd like to answer it sort of, didn't sidestep the question, but I think that approach is really important to consider when you travel places.
Great, thank you. All right, we are actually over time, but we have, I think, 2 or 3 more questions to wrap up. If just wanted to check with the panelists if we can, within the next 10 minutes, I think we will be able to wrap up the remaining questions because these are really important questions from the survey. So this one is interesting. So this is a scenario in Pamplona, Spain during the Saint Fermin Festival, where they had the running of the bulls, but the 6 bulls that are running in the morning will be followed with a bullfight, as has been a cultural tradition for many years. Now, 48% of our community will opt not to watch the bullfight, essentially. And even the one who are 8%, the flexible one, leans towards this. There is 44% who will watch the bullfight at the stadium, knowing what's going to happen after that. But I guess this question was really, I guess we were looking for a question to represent a topic around cultural relativism, and it's sometimes it's a controversial topic to talk about. And essentially, as a traveler, what's our role when we travel to places where it differs from our value system? For example, are we to judge, or how do we behave, and how is it part of the whole sustainable travel approach? And I guess I'll lean to our extreme world travelers, Boris and Billy, in terms of how did you have to deal with this in your travels, and what approaches have you seen in cases like this?
Well, I think the interesting part here is that in Spain itself, there's a lot of resistance against bullfights, and in some regions it's already outlawed. So it's not like it's tradition, so let's keep it. So people in the country themselves, especially younger people, they're questioning like, is this really something we should do, or should we just stop it? So At a personal level, I, especially in this case, I was a little bit surprised to see it's basically almost, well, let's say almost 50-50, maybe 60-40, but still a large amount of people would still watch the bullfight. For me personally, I would absolutely not, because I think I can also use my own personal values, where in this case, cruelty against animals is concerned, and I just in any case don't want to condone that. So for me, it's a clear case. I can maybe understand people who say, yeah, look, this is a local tradition, so I want to see what people do in this country. I'm not convinced that this is like a universal truth.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in and say I think I agree. Everyone is entitled to their own morals and values, and I think that shouldn't change when you travel, really. Maybe you'll do stuff when you travel that you wouldn't do at home, maybe because you don't have the opportunity. But equally, I'm interested in sort of, and yet again, I'm not going to provide answers, but flipping this question on its head of cultural relativism and looking at sort of the provision of tourism services and asking the questions whether should we fully sort of absorb ourselves in the culture and go to these authentic events. And then on the other side, what are the dangers of sort of recreating these cultural events and almost making a circus of them for the pure benefit of tourists? And I think there are definitely fine lines between that, between it being a sort of good, authentic experience and also kind of a little bit kind of appropriating. Sometimes it can get a little bit ugly from some of the things that I've seen. And I guess making a judgment of that, and doing your research into these events and what are you going to see, and is it an authentic thing? Has it been put on? All of that is something that a responsible tourist and probably a sustainable tourist would consider.
Thanks, Boris. Thanks, Billy, for your response. I think we're down to our last survey question. Actually, no, this is the second to the last. This is around the Rio de Janeiro Carnival. 54% would choose to do the VIP tickets and watch the parade. 38% choose to join the samba performance. So this was really kind of a test on where people would people choose around either participating or spectatorship. But I guess we'll probably use a different type of scenario. But what we wanted to encourage, when we travel, is really immersing ourselves and not just be like a spectator in the places that we visit, like really having, experience it with all our five senses and having that experience. I guess that's we advocate for participation over spectatorship. Anyone else wants to add on that?
I'd want to say potentially that I don't necessarily agree. And I think a big part of my traveling is a lot of the time I love to blend into the background as a tourist. I find so much value in not putting myself at the center of attention, not infringing on spaces which necessarily aren't mine. Realizing that this is someone else's home, this is someone else's life, this is someone else's town. I'm a visitor and not making myself the main character. And that's very much a personal way of approaching travel. I'd love to be a fly on the wall. I love to blend into the background and love to spectate. And I think sometimes participation can be great, but I think yet again, there's a limit to it, and there's a balance between it as well. And I think making that a thing which you have to participate, you can't just stand there and take photos, yet again is not a healthy sort of response to sustainable tourism. And definitely the approach that I've found is to take a great balance between that.
Good. I think, yeah, that is the area of opportunity here, right? Like to really find that balance around that. Okay. Thanks, Billy, for sharing that perspective. And I guess the final survey question was around the carbon offset. So this was so it showed us that majority, 77.9% of our community won't select to pay a carbon offset fee due to a variety of reasons. Essentially, there was 5.5% who were flexible, but the commentaries here was around, they'll pay an offset in another way, probably, as a lump sum at the end of the year, but not through the way where you pay it when you buy your ticket from an airline, for example. So this was probably the question that had generated the most majority within the community. And obviously, this is when we look at it in the area of carbon offsetting, and also around the travel care code around making your travel zero emissions. I think, what are your thoughts and, I guess, observations around this? And where do you think are the areas of opportunities that our travelers can practice around this area, or what would be a good approach in this?
I'll jump into that because that's one of the things that we have on our recommendations. And what I would say is a couple of things. One is, it is important that you make sure that you're getting your carbon offsets, if you choose to do that, through a reputable dealer. And so if you do that at the end of the year with somebody who has certified and understand, that's fair enough. We know that there is starting to get some legislation and some frameworks that make sure that this happens. Carbon offsetting is just an interim problem, right? One of the things that we're doing here is we're recognizing the full cost of our travel, right? So there are costs associated with us traveling that we don't pay for, and so one of them is the negative outcomes of carbon into the atmosphere that's going on. And so we're putting with an offset, we're acknowledging that we're creating that problem, but it's not a solution. And so I come back to that other point that I made earlier. By all means, look at carbon offsets as one of the ways that you can have an immediate impact in a positive way, but also be looking at how can you influence the system to change? Can you, as a frequent flyer, be encouraging the airline to be investing? Can you, as a member of society, be encouraging your politicians to be investing in research that will take us away from fuels and sort of non-renewable fuels and put us towards renewable fuels? These are the big sort of questions that, what's your own carbon footprint, but don't get tied up in that because the system has to change for real impact to happen in our stuff. So that was a big answer to a short question, but I hope that it sort of contributes in some way.
There is a question from Justin Kirby. Any recommendations of reputable offset sellers?
The trick is to find somebody who is independently verified. I've had some conversations with the folks at, I think it's Cool Change, and was impressed by them earlier on. I just happened to have come across them actually in a panel like this earlier on, but I was impressed that they were working through the issues of making sure that they were certified and independently verified. And those are the sorts of things you want from somebody who's offering offsets.
And there was a commenter before Justine that I see also wrote something about, how she feels that some carbon offsetting, or they feel some carbon offsetting is actually greenwashing, and they usually donate to a reputable tree planting org that has community involvement. I think that if you are skeptical and you can't find something that you trust on the carbon offsetting side of things, like one of my favorite things to do when I travel is to, and I mentioned this earlier, is to find what nonprofits are working in that destination, understand an issue and make a donation. There's also some tourism and travel companies that are already offering the opportunity to do this. There's a company called Kind Traveler, where you go on their website, you book a hotel, and as a part of your fee to that hotel, they automatically make a donation to a nonprofit working in that destination. So there's a lot of ways that you can still create a positive impact. I think the important part is being mindful, right? I think all of this comes down to mindfulness at the end of the day, and trying to make positive impacts in travel in a mindful way and not be mindless about it.
Agreed.
We certainly covered a lot of areas in a short span of time, and we even ran out of time. But it just goes to show the topic on, how to travel sustainably. It's a really multifaceted topic that covers a lot of areas. So thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your insights and thoughts as we also reveal the findings of our survey responses. And it just sets the work for the committee for the next coming months as we partner with CREST and with Travel Care Code to create the awareness and advocacy for traveling sustainably. So again, thank you to all our panelists for joining our webinar today, and thank you for those who joined our live stream. Apologies if we run over time, and we are going to close with a trailer of a really good film clip that we recommend for people who want to know more about how to travel sustainably as a starter. And this film is called The Last Tourist, and you will see in our blog, in the next blogs, a note from the writer and director of the film inviting our NomadMania community to watch this film. So with that, we close this webinar, and thank you so much for joining us.
We as tourists have kind of lost the plot, I think.
Holidays become cheaper.
Over-tourism and environmental degradation.
Mass tourism has led to destruction.
The world has become an oyster for the masses.
We have a fundamental problem with tourism.
The most acclaimed destinations have the highest levels of poverty.
Only 14% of every dollar that's spent in the country stays in the country.
Cruise ships comes in like always and nothing for the locals.
We're such unconscious consumers.
About $2 billion a year is spent through volunteerism.
Guys, I found the kindergarten.
She's gonna let me come see the babies.
There's been a 75% increase in orphanages.
They were there because I wanted to be there.
If tourists didn't pay money to see these entertainments, then the entertainments would change.
More than 500,000 animals are suffering around the world for different types of tourist attractions. People need to know that they're harming the very animals they care about.
It's completely shocking.
The idea we've had of a tourist has to end.
The coronavirus effect has been fast and devastating.
Tourism has an opportunity to change now. We have to change our mindset about travel. Whether I am going to be part of the solution or not.